We're travelling together at the moment, aren't we? Doing some meetings around the country.
That's
Big
right.
crowd in Wellington last night and 2 standing ovations. Do you find that everywhere you go, that you still have this incredible connection, very personal connection with people because of what you've done and who you are?
I suppose it's because of what I've done. But, it's a gift. Communication is a gift. And I happen to be given that gift. And I feel the world is in such a environmental state of chaos that it's really important to reach out to as many people as I can with the message that it's not too late to turn things around but only if we all get into the act and do our bit.
It is a relentless schedule all around the world. And do you feel it as a mission, as a burden? How do you carry it?
Both. But it is a mission. And, the 3 weeks in one place, I think now it's not even 3 weeks, it's about 2 weeks in one place twice a year. Otherwise it's just a week or 4 or 5 days.
You talk about him often, and there were many chimpanzees whose lives, families, social structures, emotions, behaviours you studied, and they were as individual in many ways as people. In fact, I think you named some of them almost after people. They would do things that would remind you of someone. Was that behind
Sometimes,
some of the names?
Yes.
But there was one who was so special, and that is David
Greybeard.
And that connection you had, just tell us one more time, if you would, for those familiar with the story. That moment of connection that you had with him that I think sealed your path for the rest of your life was what?
Well, he just allowed me to follow him. And of course, at first, all the chimpanzees ran away. They'd never seen a white ape before, and we are the 5th great ape. I mean, biologically, we are a great ape. And he allowed me to follow him. He was the first one to lose his fear. And I was trying to keep up with him through a thick tangle of vegetation. And I thought I'd lost him, came through. He was sitting looking back. I felt he was waiting for me. He may have been just irritated at the noise I was making, I don't know. But lying on the ground near him was a ripe red palm nut, and chimps love palm nuts, which grow in Gombe. And so I sat down nearby and held it out to him on my hand. And he turned away, and I put my hand closer. And he turned, he looked directly into my eyes, and still looking, he reached out, took and dropped the nut, and very gently squeezed my fingers. And in that moment, we were communicating in a language that must have predated our words. And he understood my motive was good, and I understood that he understood, but didn't want the nut. And it was a very, very powerful moment. And it gave me a connection with the chimpanzees that has never left me.
When it comes to tackling those daunting problems, fewer seem greater or more urgent than climate change, and particularly because it will be a truly global effort, and an urgent one that minimises the risk of a catastrophic change for human habitats by end century. That's the critical time, really, for what's going to happen to temperature and sea level. How hopeful were you about the Paris Accord, signed by every country except 2? Do you see that gesture even as a reason for hope?
There was a lot of speculation at the time that so many countries just signed it and that it wouldn't mean anything because there wouldn't be legislation to back it up. But I've been quite pleasantly surprised at how it really has pushed many countries to trying to curb carbon emissions. It's raised a growing awareness about the effect of heavy meat eating that's having around the world as habitats are destroyed to grow the grain to feed the animals, and fossil fuel is used to transport the grain, the animals and the meat. And also that these billions of animals that are now in these appalling conditions are producing methane gas, food in one end and gas out the other. And that is a contributing factor to climate change. And it's not that climate change will affect the planet. It is already. And I've seen it. I've seen the ice melting. I've seen the the glaciers on top of the mountains disappearing. Mount Kilimanjaro was the great symbol in Tanzania, the snows of Kilimanjaro. There's hardly any snow for most of the year now. And sea levels are rising, the ocean is warming. What we're doing to this planet is deadly. China and India are the two countries that are now taking the lead since President Trump has pulled out of the Paris Accord. They're taking the lead in developing clean, green energy. China right now is in the lead. People have seen the writing on the wall, and some people realize that fossil fuel supplies are not infinite, and we're destroying the planet so much as we try to reach fossil fuel that's under the ocean or under the rainforests. And people are beginning to understand. Trump wants to reintroduce coal mining. Australia is just wanting to give the go-ahead to a huge coal mine, the Carmichael coal mine, which will pollute the ocean and be sort of the last final hit for the Great Barrier Reef. So, all these things people are beginning to understand. And as more and more of the general public realize these things, they're going to turn automatically to try and support those companies that are doing it right.
So come back to the palm oil. The clearing of the rainforests and the deforestation. Are you seeing places where that is shifting? Your beloved Gombe, of course, you were part of setting up a project there, but are you seeing places where that is shifting, or does that still remain a really big and hard to resolve problem?
I think it's a hard to resolve problem. There's certainly places where the forest is being protected and restored, and big battles going on right now in parts of Brazil and so forth. But nevertheless, conservation comes up against development all the time, and it comes up against corruption. So stamping out corruption, I don't know how we do that, but it's one of the most important things. So, on the one hand, let's alleviate poverty where people destroy the environment because they have to try and make a living. On the other hand, we've got to do something about the unsustainable, greedy lifestyle of so many people around the planet, the affluent people who have so much more stuff than they actually need, and very often more stuff than they want, and where the measure of success is how much money has he made, how much stuff has he got. We need a different measure of a successful life. And then there's the growing human population. So all of these, corruption is tied in with so many of those.
In New Zealand, we have our own environmental challenges. It's a very blessed country in many ways, but at the moment, water quality is a very major issue.
Because of the dairy farming, the numbers of cows out there, and unfortunately the water runoff is polluting rivers and then ending up polluting the ocean.
Another big area at the moment, of course, and I'm interested in your view on this, is trying to save some of our most endangered species. And the government's embarked on this very focused program of predator control, dubbed Predator Free New Zealand. What's your view on it?
Well, the view, this is one of these ethical problems, and it's almost impossible to get a really balanced view. But all I can say is that these introduced species like possums and cats and so forth that are decimating New Zealand's bird life is a tragedy. And do we want to try and save New Zealand's indigenous life? Yes, we do. It's not the fault of these introduced species that they're here. We brought them here for the most part, introduced them. And they are individuals whose lives matter. I mean, and a possum's life is just as valuable, and it's just as much an individual as a kakapo, for example. So, yes, we need to remove them. How do we remove them humanely? I don't know. It's really, really difficult. And I've spent hours talking to people about it. It's really important to introduce this Roots and Shoots program to them, because Roots and Shoots, which is, by the way, a program of the Jane Goodall Institute, it's not a separate entity, and it is helping young people understand the problems, and then listening to them, and then empowering them to take action working with them to make this a better world. We've messed it up. We've messed up their future. So that when I hear we haven't inherited this planet from our parents, we borrowed it from our children, I get really angry, because we haven't borrowed. We've stolen, we're still stealing, and it's no good saying we have to leave it to this generation to sort it out. We have to encourage them and empower them to take action, but we've got to help them. Once children are exposed to nature, to the wonder of animals, that really begins to help them to change. You know, earlier I said, think globally, act locally. Thinking globally depresses you. Roots and Shoots is the other way around. Act locally, do your little bit. It may seem small, and that can include kindness to animals and to people. And, you know, we do a lot of work with food banks and things like that for the poor people. And in Tanzania, we work with street children and refugees in Europe. And so when young people know that this is happening in 99 countries, so their little bit may seem small, but then they realize it's happening, like, for example, it soon will be all over New Zealand. But it's not only New Zealand, it's Australia, and then it's other parts of Europe. And so it's like filling in a tapestry. So if we see the tapestry as black with all the problems, then every time we're addressing a problem, there's a little strand of gold. I've always loved being alone, and being alone is very different from being lonely. And being alone out in the rainforest, you're not alone. You're surrounded by life forms where everything is interconnected. And in the rare moments when you are completely in tune with the natural world, you are part of it. And no longer are you a human sitting there. You're part of the natural world. And it's a feeling that's very hard to explain. I think it's a little bit what the mystics talk about. And it's the most amazing feeling. And it's that natural world that I'm going to fight till I die to try and protect for future generations. Good night.